It's been a day of remembrance here in Germany to pay tribute to the almost 80,000 people who have died of COVID-19 since the pandemic hit the country. The commemorative service was led by German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier in central Berlin. It was, he said, a chance to say goodbye in dignity to those lost to COVID-19, many of whom died alone and without their families because of pandemic restrictions. President Steinmeier was joined by Chancellor Angela Merkel and other political leaders, and by family members of some of those who died from the coronavirus. They begged their fellow Germans to continue to do all they can to keep themselves healthy and to keep others healthy by following pandemic restrictions. In his eulogy, President Steinmeier spoke of the loss of the victims.
Today, we're focusing not on numbers and statistics, but on the people that we've lost. Women and men from all regions of our country, the very elderly, but also people of all ages. We call to mind their names, faces, and stories. For all of their differences and the different ways in which they lived, they're all missed by their families and friends, by their neighbors and their colleagues, by our society. None of them will come back, but they remain in our memories. We will not forget them.
And with me in the studio is our political correspondent, Hans Brandt. Now, Hans, it was definitely very emotional. Where can we start? How touching was it to hear from family members of those who had lost loved ones?
Well, yes, that was, I think, the point of the ceremony. Although the president obviously spoke a eulogy, it was meant to be a service or a commemoration event for the victims and their families. And they were from a very wide spectrum. Obviously, that was the way that they were chosen, also the way that they were picked. There was a woman who lost her disabled young daughter to COVID-19. There was the wife of a doctor who ran a hospital and in his own hospital presumably caught the virus and then died. There was also the daughter of a Turkish immigrant who made his family life here in Germany, and the daughter, very young daughter of a man who was very young when he died but did not die of COVID-19. He died of leukemia, of cancer of the blood, but also died basically on his own, alone, because of the restrictions. And finally, there was the son of a woman who was in a care home because she was suffering from dementia, and she too was, in a sense, left alone because her family was not able to see her during that time.
Is there a reason for the timing of this service? Why now?
There is no exact reason. There has been some debate about this, in fact. Some people have said the commemoration should have happened a lot earlier. Other countries have had similar events before. Some people say we should be commemorating victims continuously because people continue to die, and we should not ignore that. The president himself has said it's now been a year or just over a year since the pandemic struck. We cannot wait for the pandemic to end to do this commemoration because we don't know when it will end. And so he's saying it's a moment to stand back and to, in a sense, commemorate, but also to gather our strength for the new continuing infections, the third wave, as we're talking about it at the moment, of this pandemic.
Now, sticking to that, looking ahead, Germany, as you rightly said, is in the grip of a third wave with record new infections in recent days. What is the government proposing to do?
There's been a lot of dispute about what is the right way to go, and this dispute has been, in fact, going on for months. Mainly, it's the central government of Angela Merkel, the Chancellor on one hand, and on the other side, the 16 federal states and their leaders, who in fact have the power to decide what happens in their regions. And while Angela Merkel has always been for stricter measures, the regional leaders have resisted that, and that continues to this day. At the moment, there are discussions about imposing a central government lockdown. A new law is likely to be passed for that in this coming week, but there's still resistance from the regions, so it's not quite clear to what extent Angela Merkel is able to push through what she really would like to do, a hard lockdown.
I guess only time will tell. DW's political correspondent, Hans Brandt, thank you.
Detlef Jacobs keeps memories of his mother Renate alive in this photo album. My mother was a person who liked to be around others, who liked to be with friends, who liked to socialize. If she hadn't caught the virus, the nearly 80-year-old would probably still be alive, like Helga Kokott, who was also a victim of the pandemic. My mother was an exceptionally strong person who put a lot of energy into the family and also kept the family together. She was the heart and soul of the family for everyone in it. The 93-year-old was fighting fit before she was transferred to this clinic after catching the virus in the care facility where she lived. But her son doesn't blame anyone for her death. We had just spent those beautiful summer months where you had the feeling that life could go back to normal. So I can't blame anyone. Looking back, knowing what I do today, they could perhaps have had stricter measures in place. The months before his mother Renate's death were particularly difficult for Detlef Jacobs. She was in a retirement home because she suffered from dementia, and due to a strict lockdown in the spring, no one was allowed to see her for months. It was difficult because my mother couldn't be reached by telephone. Due to her dementia, she often didn't respond to phone calls. So those 3 months were very hard for us relatives.
Das heißt also, die Zeit, diese 3 Monate, waren für uns Angehörige ganz schlimm.
In the summer, Detlef Jacobs was finally able to see his mother again. But then she was infected with the virus and had to be quarantined. When her situation worsened and her children desperately wanted to visit her, it was too late. During the pandemic, many people like Helga Kokott passed away in extremely lonely circumstances. Helga Kokott's son could not be with her when she died. In my case, it wasn't possible because I have a sick family member at home whom I have to protect. I was very concerned that I might bring the virus home with me. Renate Jacobs was a florist and always very close to nature. She wanted to be buried in the forest. Thankfully, Detlef Jacobs was able to grant his mother her last wish.
Now, to some other developments in the pandemic. India recorded more than 230,000 new cases on Saturday. That's more than 3 times the daily case number in the US, the world's worst-hit nation. Pope Francis has given his first in-person Sunday blessing in the Vatican after weeks of lockdown. Italy is set to begin easing restrictions later this month. Israelis no longer have to wear face masks outdoors, and schools have fully reopened in the latest steps towards normal life after a mass vaccination campaign.